Today on the 229 podcast.
If we don't do our jobs well, or even if we do our jobs really well, but the threat actors happen to just get it right that one time, we could impact patient care.
My name is Bill Russell. I'm a former health system CIO and creator of This Week Health, where our mission is to transform healthcare one connection at a time. Welcome to the 229 podcast, where we continue the conversations happening at our events with the leaders who are shaping healthcare. Let's jump into today's conversation. All right. Hey, it's the 229 podcast, and this is where we continue the conversations that start at the 229 meetings. And today we're joined by Anahi Santiago, the Chief Information Security Officer at ChristianaCare out of Delaware. Are all those things still correct, or did they add things to your title or move you around? Or
No, I mean, we're expanding in terms of our coverage. So we're not just Delaware, we're Maryland, we're Pennsylvania, we're moving into New Jersey, but title's the same.
Wow, you've had a lot of longevity there. You've been there for a while, haven't you?
Over 10 and a half years.
Wow. Is that the norm for the CISO role these days, or is it less than that?
No, I mean, I think the statistic states that on average, a CISO sticks around for about 18 months. I happen to have 2 tenures. I was at Einstein for 10 and a half, and now I'm blowing past that at ChristianaCare with 10 and a half. I'm just lucky that I've worked for 2 amazing organizations that have given me absolutely no reason to want to look elsewhere.
Why do you think there is movement in the CISO role? Do you think it's because of the demands of the role? Do you think it's because people getting promoted out of the role, people moving from organization to organization? I mean, what do you feel, or what do you see as you look around the industry?
There are different types of CISOs. I think that there's a great demand. I think that there's some CISOs that just hop because they find different, more rewarding opportunities, whether it's financially or different organizations. I think some come in, they put their mark, and then they feel like they need to move on. I do think that there are some that join an organization with aspirations to make impacts, and then they come across a lack of support for cybersecurity because of competing priorities. And I think that's a big reality, right? Like, I'm lucky to work for an organization that prioritizes cybersecurity, so I don't have a lot of friction when it comes to advancing the program. But I know a lot of CISOs that come up against organizations that either don't want to invest in it, culturally don't want to adopt it, and frankly, in some organizations where it becomes an ethical concern, where an organization might want to file an attestation around cybersecurity and put their CISO's signature on it, and the CISO's just not comfortable from a professional liability in doing so. And then I think some are being promoted out of the job. I know it's CISOs that are moving to be associate CIOs and gain greater responsibilities. I think it's a mix of things.
It's interesting. I was talking to a CIO yesterday who will remain nameless because they interviewed for another job. And I said, well, this is the first time you've interviewed in a while. What struck you? He said, what struck me was the starting salary. I said, really? Why is that? He goes, well, because I've been at this location for a long time. And, when they told me what the starting salary was for a CIO for a little bit larger, but pretty much a comparable health system, it was significantly more than what he was currently making. And I said, well, that could be for any number of reasons. One is the job market is hard to find for certain roles, CISO being one of those. It's hard to find that role. Do you think there's a disparity in, let's just say that certain health systems recognize the need for really good cybersecurity, recognize the need to put in a program and pay accordingly for that, whereas others don't?
I get a lot of calls from recruiters. And although I'm not actively in the job market, I take those calls because I have friends that are in the market, and I want to, I'm a connector. Like, if I can help people. And when I talk to these recruiters, I'm actually disappointed at the level of pay that healthcare is commanding for CISOs. I think in the healthcare industry, and I should say in the healthcare provider industry, CISOs are still woefully underpaid in comparison to other
To
subsectors in
yeah,
healthcare and outside of healthcare.
I mean, one of the topics I did write down here that I want to talk to you about is the CISO role, but mostly about healthcare. Healthcare's unique challenges versus other industry challenges. I mean, we talk a lot about how healthcare is unique and has unique challenges and is complex. It would stand to reason that you need to pay somebody for that complexity to manage that complexity and that challenge. But I want to talk specifically about the differences. What makes being a CISO in healthcare unique and challenging?
Well, let's start with the obvious, life safety.
Yeah.
If we don't do our jobs well, or even if we do our jobs really well, but the threat actors happen to just get it right that one time, we could impact patient care.
Well, and saw
The
that a lot last year, right? I mean, we had significant outages. Ascension, we had Change Healthcare, we had a bunch.
Absolutely. And, that leads to emergency room diversions. It leads to canceled surgeries. It leads to oncology patients unable to get their treatment. I mean, it really does have a significant patient impact. Even something like Change Healthcare, which was really, had a financial impact. Patients were showing up in pharmacies and they couldn't get insurance verification and were being turned away and they couldn't get medications. I had a friend who paid $3,000 out of his own pocket to get a life-saving medication that he couldn't live without because he couldn't get insurance verification. And so that's one big challenge. I also think that as an industry, we have traditionally not been as mature as other industries in terms of investments in cybersecurity and alignment with the level of technology adoption that healthcare has undertaken over the last 15 years that has left our industry with a whole bunch of holes. The shrinking margins aren't helping now. We have to compete more and more now with investments in clinical delivery. And then I would say that the open nature of hospitals. When I first entered into healthcare, I had a little bit of a panic attack asking myself, what did I get myself into? Because I came from systems and technology where we had a badge. You couldn't get into the building without going through a security guard. It was a one-to-one ratio. My computer was my computer. Nobody came into my office. In healthcare, you've got patients walking around floors, you've got mobile carts with computers in the hallways. You've got nursing stations with 12 people competing for the same workstation, bells ringing, people running around. It's just very difficult to corral and implement sound security when the dynamics are so fluid. So I think all of those factors contribute to the difficulties.
And I would point out biomed is really distinct to healthcare and not a small problem to solve. I mean, because even, a lot of those biomed devices are FDA approved. The FDA approval, you just look at it and go, hey, can we upgrade the Windows XP on this device and, take it to something that's a little bit more, I don't know, current than the year 2000? And the response is, well, you can, but then it's not FDA approved anymore. Like it has to go through that cycle. Now, I know we've made a lot of progress on that, but back when I was a CIO, I remember we did an inventory. The number of XP devices on the network just shocked me. I'm like, what? I don't even understand where these come from. They go, oh, those are all biomed. And they said, don't worry about them. Like, what do you mean?
Yeah, it's interesting because you're right. Biomed devices create a lot of complexity. The certification cycle for FDA is at times longer than the supported operating system cycle for Microsoft. And then because they're FDA certified, it's not like a regular Windows device where if it gets infected, we just either throw it out and install a new one or wipe it clean and restore for backup. We actually did a tabletop exercise with Philips a few weeks ago to sort of walk through the scenario of what we would have to do to respond to a ransomware infection when it came to a Philips medical device. And it's not something that ChristianaCare or any provider can just take on their own. They have to coordinate all of those recovery processes with the medical device vendor, which creates even more complexities. And if, we were intentional in running through this tabletop exercise, but in my mind, I was extrapolating to the fact that out of the 90,000 IP addresses that are connected to our network, 70,000 of those are medical devices. And if I had to go through what I went through in this tabletop exercise with 70,000 other devices and however many manufacturers are associated with those medical devices, like the recovery time to get our hospital back up and running feels untenable. But the reality of it is that's how challenging it will be in the face of a massive cyber attack.
I was talking to somebody yesterday, in fact, about their experience with a significant breach that went on at their health system. And one of the points that this person made as I was talking to him was one of the hardest things was to get the vendors on the phone. I was like, what do you mean? It's like, well, first of all, we have a lot of them. And when you have a system-wide breach and outage, like you need them all to sort of be at the table. And it wasn't as easy as I thought it was going to be to say, hey, we're having an outage, and they would provide the right resource. All that stuff really has to be thought of ahead of time, doesn't it?
In this tabletop exercise, we actually called Philips, the support desk, and the person on the other line didn't know that we were running through a tabletop exercise. They reacted as they would, and it was a wonderful experience. And I think Philips patted themselves in the back because it went so well. But I don't know that every other vendor would have responded as efficiently as this particular service desk individual at Philips responded.
Well, and having been in so many other industries, I think just the sheer number of vendors that I found in health. I remember when I came in, they said, well, I said, well, how many applications are we looking at? They're like, instances of applications or applications? I'm like, both. So, well, about 1,300 applications, about 1,900 instances of those applications. Some are, you have 3 or 5 instances of the same application at different hospitals. So I'm looking at them going, okay, I've been in manufacturing, I've been in banking, that is application sprawl that is really not common outside of healthcare. It's amazing how many vendors we have to deal with.
And to your point, one vendor, we could have 10 different systems from that one vendor. And for the very large vendors, they almost act like separate companies. Like just because I'm dealing with an oncology product for one name vendor, if I move over to a home health product for that same name vendor, they're completely different companies. They don't even talk to each other. And the ecosystem is expanding. I just referenced home health. Now we used to have medical devices connected to our network. Now we're sending medical devices to patients' homes for remote patient monitoring, for hospital at home programs, for virtual care. And so we no longer have to worry about protecting devices that are on our network. We've got to figure out how to protect those devices when they're on somebody else's home network.
That's amazing. Hey, I'm curious. I've only sat through a handful of tabletop exercises. From your perspective, what makes a good tabletop exercise? What do you look for in a good, I don't know, somebody who's going to coordinate a tabletop exercise? What does a good one look like?
A good one. So I think one of the best tabletop exercises that I have experienced happened recently. A couple of months ago, CISO came in and led a tabletop exercise for us, and we had participation from different areas of the organization, operational. I think IT has done enough tabletop exercises that although we will continue to learn, we've gotten pretty good at it. But our hospitals have not gotten really good at understanding how they're going to operate in the face of a ransomware attack. We've got good downtime procedures for a few hours, maybe a day, but not for 4 to 6 weeks. And so In our most recent internal tabletop exercise, we brought in people from home health, from the emergency areas, lab radiology, operational people that needed to exercise how they were going to work with that technology. And what really added value to this particular tabletop exercise is we had 13 state, local, and federal agencies at the table participating in the room, physically in the room, participating in this tabletop exercise. And what we learned is that, the State Department, the Department of Health for Delaware and Maryland could do the calling to other hospitals if we needed to divert or even transfer people out of beds. Our local National Guard could stand up makeshift hospitals in our parking lots. Other local agencies could actually source paper if we run out of paper, because that seems to be what I hear a lot when I talk to my peers, is that they physically run out of paper.
Yeah, I heard the same thing. That's wild.
The participation of those local and regional agencies in helping us to understand how we could leverage them, I thought was immensely valuable. So I would encourage everyone to include your local agencies in your tabletop exercises, because in the 20 years that I've been doing this, I learned more than I have ever learned.
We do learn more through the events. Like I love talking to people who have gone through a ransomware event. And, because after you've gone through it, like, you could do tabletop after tabletop, but after you've gone through it and they say things like, yeah, we didn't have the forms. Like we didn't have enough of the forms. Like we were down for 30 days. We didn't have enough pens. I was like, really? They're like, yeah, you spend so much time on the downtime and recovery procedures and where's the data and what's the source of data and how do we clean. Like we spend so much time on that. And I think one of the things that's come up over and over again is something you mentioned, which is who owns the downtime. And the most common thing I hear at our meetings is it's spread out. It's spread out. Like you would own a piece, but each hospital, even potentially each department in that hospital, would own their own downtime procedures. And some of them are advanced and some of them are woefully inadequate. Like they will find out when it actually goes down, like, wow, we didn't really think this through. And so that's one of the things that I keep hearing is we don't have like a common person that is really about business continuity and recovery across the operation, if you will. We have it in IT, but we don't have it across the entire operation.
I would 100% agree with you. In fact, we now have created what I'm calling an operational resiliency steer. And we have a programmatic effort in ensuring that our operational capabilities in the face of an attack are aligned with the ability to operate without technology. And it's the steer is comprised of executive leaders across the organization. So think in terms of all of the campus presidents, executives in finance, in compliance, in materials management, public safety, so on and so forth. And I'm leading that effort, even though it's not really a cybersecurity function, but recognizing that it's a really critical need, because it's not an if, it's a when, and it's not going to be a day, it's going to be weeks. And I'm finding it to be a huge lift, but one that requires organizational priority. And luckily for our organization, we're giving it the priority and resourcing it appropriately. But this isn't going to be a multi-week project. This is going to be a multi-year program.
Yeah, program, right. So project has a start date and an end date, and a program does not. That's the distinction I make.
Yeah.
And it's just ongoing, constantly updating, constantly looking at the environment. I'm going to ask you a question to put you in a situation that you're not currently in or looking to be in, but I think it's valuable because I want to ask you about creating a culture of security, but I want to ask it in a different way. And that is, if you were interviewing at a new health system and you're interviewing with the leaders, what are you looking to hear from them to determine like where they're at in terms of their maturity, in terms of their willingness to support the CISO, in order for their willingness to support a program? What kind of things are you looking to hear from? What kind of things would be red flags to you? Like, if I came on board here, I would experience a lot of friction and maybe a pretty uphill battle.
The only reason I interviewed Christiana was because I wanted to get interview practice.
Oh, you
I
liar. You interviewed because it's close to the Eagles and the Phillies. That's why you interviewed there.
well, at the time I was working at a hospital in North Philadelphia.
Oh,
Uh,
that's even closer. I'm sorry.
yeah,
I didn't mean
yeah,
to accuse you there. I just know your
and
love.
yeah, and frankly, Christiana, uh, my current job at the time was a subway right away. Christiana was a 45-minute drive down the
Got it.
highway. So I didn't know much about Christiana, but I thought I would just get a practice interview. And during the interview process, I learned that they had a culture that prioritized cybersecurity, starting with the CEO all the way down. And so I fell in love with the culture and with everything that I heard when it came to their understanding of cybersecurity and their prioritization of cybersecurity. And so that's, if I were to interview at different organizations, that's what I would want to hear. I would want to hear that they actually understand and want to invest in cybersecurity. Even if what I heard was, we're not there yet, but we want to get there, that for me would be an exciting message, because it would invigorate me to want to move into an organization that, even if they have not adopted it, there's energy around wanting to adopt. I have interviewed at organizations where what I heard was, got a really difficult physician population, and you're going to have a really difficult time getting them to listen to you. So how are you going to sell it to them?
How are you? It's your job to get these people to do their cybersecurity stuff.
Yes, like literally, I was being interviewed about what my skill sets were going to be to get them to drink the water. And after, that 1 hour interview, I thought, no, thank you. I don't want a second interview. I have no interest in working for an organization where the interview led with that line of questioning. And so those are the two polar experiences. I went for one role and I've been there for 10 and a half years because it's been an incredible experience. I'm so thankful that I did not agree to a second interview with the other organization.
Well, we find that in the 229 meetings. It's been a while since I've led a CISO meeting. Drex typically does those, but the ones I did, I remember there's typically one or two people in the room that you just look at them and go, you have to get executive support. Like you're going to continue to beat your head against the wall until somebody, hopefully the highest level within the executive team, sort of acknowledges it. And they said, well, I can't do that. What's the alternative? I'm like, have a breach. I mean, seriously, like if you want to get their attention, have a breach and then say, hey, this is what we were talking about. I'm like, not cause a breach, but essentially they're not going to listen. If you can't get them to listen based on what's going on in our industry, the only thing that's going to get them to listen is probably an incident.
But that's unfortunate, because if you have a breach, patients suffer. And if you're working for an organization, in my opinion, there are plenty of roles and opportunities out there. If you are working for an organization where you are just fighting uphill, it's time to consider moving on.
I really commend you because you're one of the people who says this over and over again. Security is patient safety. I think it's indicative of how they view patient safety if they don't prioritize cybersecurity. And, I feel for the people who are in that role, but almost the best thing they can do is go somewhere else.
I do think that, and I'm very quick to say, well, find another job. But I also think that we have an opportunity to truly align cybersecurity to patient safety. And it starts with, as CISOs and executive leaders in the organization, understanding what it is that the organization's mission and vision is, and ensuring that we align our cybersecurity programs and our conversations with leaders across the organization with what's important to them, so that perhaps we can ensure that we socialize and create a culture of cybersecurity by understanding what the organization needs to accomplish and ensuring that our conversations are tied to that. And so when I started ChristianaCare, the first thing I did was schedule meetings with all of the executive leaders across the organization. And my conversation started with, "Hi, my name's Anahi Santiago. I'm the new CISO. What's important to you? Like, what keeps you up at night? What are your priorities, so that I can understand how to align my cybersecurity program with what's important to the organization?" I did not show up at those meetings with, "Here's why cybersecurity is so important. Here's what you need to know," because I think that's a non-conversation started, and it doesn't help to build relationships. So for me, it was really important to show up with what's important to you and how can I help you.
I could definitely see that. So you must be in a pretty good mood because the Phillies, I think, are in first place, and the Eagles look pretty good so far this year.
We just swept the Mets, 4-game series, and I was at 3 out of those 4 games. So not only did I show up in a good mood, but I'm surprised I'm actually coherent because the last 3 nights have been very late nights for me.
How do you feel about the playoff run?
When I first heard that Wheels was gonna be out of commission, I panicked. But then everybody else is stepping up, and and we picked up the tarantula, and he's amazing. I mean, 103-mile pitches, mile-an-hour pitches, like, he's just incredible. Last night, when he came on the mound, like, the whole stadium got just super excited, and I think that's how we all kind of feel moving into the playoffs. I'm super excited.
I'm hopeful for you. The 4-year Nola deal, I think, was a bad deal. I know you guys love Aaron Nola, but he doesn't have 4 years left in him. But he might have a good playoff run left in him, or a couple games.
He's been pretty inconsistent, coming off of his injury. And so I don't know what we're going to get out of Noah. I'm optimistic, but honestly, like, he's not the player that excites me. I'd rather see Ranger on the mound. Certainly a little nervous about him, little nervous about Walker. Sanchez has been giving us a good showing. It just, we'll see.
The interesting thing to me is both those programs, the Eagles and the Phillies, it almost feels New England-esque at this point. I mean, they're championship teams every year. They don't necessarily win, but they're going to be in the playoffs. They're going to be in the conversation. And I think that started at the leadership level. I think they have good GMs and good owners in both places. They're willing to spend money on key talent, and they're not afraid to make hard decisions. The Eagles was an interesting one to me because they had, oh, I forget the guy's name, who took them to the playoffs, and the quarterback, and then they ended up moving him aside for Jalen Hurts. That was one of those decisions that was, well, do we, don't we? And they made the decision, and clearly Hurts is a great quarterback, and that was the right move. But we forget how difficult those decisions are to make as leaders at the time.
So Carson Wentz was our number
That's
one
right.
quarterback, right? And it's one of those, where were you? I remember when draft night, when the Eagles drafted Hurts, and my husband was down in the man cave watching the draft by himself, and I was actually on a Zoom call with a whole bunch of other Eagles friends that we travel together, and we were just watching the draft over Zoom. And when Hurts got drafted, my entire Zoom friend call heard the one word that I will not repeat on this call that came from my husband's mouth down in the man cave, that everybody heard on the Zoom call. And I think that was the general sense across Eagle fandom at the time. And boy, do we not feel that way anymore. And I think it speaks to, our leadership, starting with Howie Grossman, who at one point, our owner sort of put him in a closet and sent him around the world, like demoted him and sent him around the world to study other sports organizations and their leadership. And he came back a different GM. And I don't think anybody would second guess anything that he did at this point. He's a magician.
It is pretty amazing. And, why do we spend so much time talking about sports? Because the analogies for sports and leading at a health system are pretty clear. From time to time, I'll talk to CIOs and they'll say, man, I have this problem, this person, da, da, da. And over the years, I've been like, hey, coach them, do this. And I've been Mr., you can rehab anybody kind of thing. And I think that is a very valid strategy. More and more recently, I've just been like, how much of a problem is this? And if they say it's a big problem, like, problems do not get better with age. Like, and they just look at me like, well, that's pretty harsh. I'm like, well, I'm not in your chair. So I'm not looking at the person. You're just asking me, how to evaluate this thing. And, sports team owners have very clear metrics and we all see it, right? It's the score every week. It's the score and then it's championships and very clear metrics. Ours are not nearly as clear. It would be nice if they were as clear so that we could make the decisions we need to make with more clarity. But that's what I take away from sports. Maybe it's a bad thing to take away from sports, but that's, as I sort of look at it, I am marveled that the Patriots won 6 championships. I'm amazed that the Steelers won 4. I'm amazed. I look at those and I go, all right, how did they do that? How did they create a culture over time that won over and over again?
Do you think it's culture? Sports are probably as unpredictable as healthcare, given that your best player could be taken out with just one roll of an ankle and your season can change. And, the Eagles in 2017, 2018 are a great example of that. Our top quarterback goes out. We win the Super Bowl with a backup. And why? Because the culture of that team, of that organization, enabled us to carry it. And I think healthcare is the same way. If you've got a culture of patient safety, of assuming good intentions, which is one of our core values, of always wanting to put the patient first, you can overcome many of the challenges that we're all experiencing. We're experiencing huge challenges right now when it comes to margins and when it comes to uncertainty. But if we have the right level of culture and we can have difficult conversations that allow us to overcome them, then I think we can get ahead of the mountains that are in front of us.
Yeah. Building culture. Anahi, I want to thank you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for, recovering from last night's game and joining us here on a Friday morning. Really appreciate you. Thanks for listening to the 229 podcast. The best conversations don't end when the event does. They continue here with our community of healthcare leaders. Join us by subscribing at thisweekhealth.com/subscribe. If you have a conversation that's too good not to share, reach out. Also, check out our events on the 229project.com website. Share this episode with a peer. It's how we grow our network, increase our collective knowledge, and transform healthcare together. Thanks for listening. That's all for now.